It's no secret that being a dad is messy. But don't worry, Dr. Rocco is here to help you raise the next generation of happy and successful children. Through conversations with other dads going through similar struggles, you'll hear what they went through and how they came out the other side better than ever before. If you're ready to better yourself through personal development so you can be a better dad, then listen on. Welcome to It's Dad Time. Here's your host, Dr. Rocco.
All right, so again, I know you're on a time schedule, so we're going to just jam. I kind of want to give a background of how I came about finding you, because I think then it will just snowball from there. So what had happened is about a year ago, I hadn't really ever invested before. Somebody told me about this investment, so I put like $500 in this cryptocurrency investment. And in like 30 days, I had $1,000, and I could take it out and do this whole thing. And I was like, whoa. So then I'm like, let me put more money in there, and then more money in there, and more money in there. And then I took all the money I had and put it in there, right? And it just kept going and going and going. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to keep doing it because I'm making so much money hand over fist every day, and this is amazing and all these things. And I'm telling this story short because eventually for my listeners, I'll tell the whole story, right? And I woke up one morning and $78,000 was gone. Yeah. Gone. And needless to say, I puked and cried for like 3 days. It was brutal. And so in the puking and the crying, I was like, never again. And there were obvious glaring mistakes that I had made, just even beginner investment basics, right? But I was like, there has to be something else here. Like, I'm missing something. And so I kind of just put it up there for the universe. Like, I know I'm missing something, but I don't know what it is. But let's figure this out. And out of nowhere, I was like scrolling through Instagram, and I just saw this clip, maybe like a 10-second clip of this like multimillionaire being like, I don't know why everybody invests in the S&P 500. You should have a whole life policy. You earn between 4 and 7% a year, whether the market's up or the market's down. All your money should be in there. And I sent it to one of my buddies who also lost money quite a bit too. And I was like, what is this? And he's like, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, I have to find out. So I just send this mass text out to everybody in my network. I'm like, what the hell is this? Nobody knew. One person referred me to a friend of them and was like, hey, this person would know. I sent an audio message to that person. That person, within a minute, linked me to the money multiplier and was like, here's your answer. And I was like, what? I watched the video and was like, nothing in my life has made more sense to me.
Seriously? Okay, so when you watched the 90-minute video, you said that?
Yes, 100%.
You've probably never heard, or maybe you've heard my story on the video actually, but when I don't know how old, but 2014, when I first watched that video, I said the same thing. And remember, I was a Wall Street guy, and I watched that video, and all of a sudden it was just crystal clear. And I was almost thinking, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so stupid. I can't believe I hadn't figured this out on my own.
You know, and to bring that even a step farther, then I sent that to one of my friends who's a financial guy. He does mergers and acquisitions, and so he knows a decent amount about finances. And he knew about this, and I had asked him about it, and he's like, the only thing I know is the wealthiest people in the world do it, but I have not found anywhere that I can read and understand it to where I feel comfortable doing it. And I'm like, bro, I got you. So I send him like the 90-minute video. I bought the book, I think Nash or whatever wrote the book. I bought the book, read it in like a day. He calls me and he was like, I get it now. He walked downstairs from like his house and like went to his wife. He goes, how much is in the 401k? Because we're moving it. Like, it makes so much sense. And when I started this whole podcast and everything, which, as that crypto has grown, I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to have a team. I'm going to do this, all these fun things. I'm like, mostly it's for men, and mostly we get on and we talk about the struggles of being a father. And, maybe we'll get into that as time goes on, or we'll have you on again and all those things. But what we do with our money and what we teach our children is so important. And I found that this all came out of a desire of me wanting to make sure my daughter never is in the position I'm in and has the best, most advantageous life possible financially. And then you sent me your TED Talk, and I'm crying. I've watched it like 3 times. Every time I end up crying.
Dude, every time I cry on it too, so you're not alone. I can't read the damn thing or get through the thing without crying.
Yeah, it's and I think anybody who, and I'll probably link that when I post this because I think it's so powerful for dads. But I wanted to get on, and I wanted you to just have the opportunity to tell people maybe about your journey, how this comes about, what it is. if we have time, how you plan to implement this with your children and what you teach them about finances. Again, I know we're on a time schedule. We can do that at another date if we need to. But I think a lot of people out there want to know, like, how do I even teach my kids about finances? You know?
Yeah, and it starts at a young age, but it's okay if your kids aren't young. I mean, you can still teach them. But I think one of the biggest problems with society, I just did a webinar yesterday about this, is we've gotten, as parents, we've gotten in the habit of just giving our kids things. When our kid wants something, we just give our kid, whatever they want. And, let me ask you a question. I mean, I'm 45, so when your child's old enough to have a car, are you just going to give them a car?
No chance.
Yeah, good. But if I ask the majority of the people out there, the answer is yes. And if I ask the majority of the parents, fathers and mothers, whether or not they gave their child their first car, like no strings attached, just here's your car, the answer is they do. But then if I ask them the same question about when they grew up, when you were growing up, did your parents give you your first car? And all of a sudden, the dynamic changes. The answer is no. So that means... So during this time frame, and we can use a 30 to 50 year time frame, something is broken and something has happened where now all of a sudden we feel like we have to give our children things and we don't teach them to earn that. And then I come back and ask those same people, ask all the parents, all the fathers on here, do you value things that you get for free the same way you value things that you pay for?
That's
the answer
a good question.
Always no. It's no, it absolutely not. And even if somebody says, oh yeah, I do, the facts and the statistics will show you do not value things that are given to you the same way you value things that you had to give up blood, sweat, and tears to earn. So right there is the first part of the problem. So when I talk to parents and I talk to fathers, and in my TEDx talk, the number one thing I'm teaching my daughter. Now I want to be clear. My daughter, as of right now, is almost 3. Okay, so when I did the TEDx talk, she was 2.5. She's now almost 3. So my daughter, I can't really teach her about money at this point, but I can teach her the value of things. I can teach her how to value things, like when she's got a phone, because kids today, I didn't know this, but they don't even watch TV anymore. They just watch YouTube Kids, which I think is better because I can control what they watch and I can put some interesting things in there. But getting back to the point is, as she gets older, I'm going to start teaching her those lessons in that TEDx talk. Like, first off, I'm going to show her how hard I work for everything that we have. I'm going to walk her through when she gets in the car. I'm going to say, see this car? It's a nice car. People like it. People, say, wow, nice car. And she'll notice this. And she'll be like, yeah. And she'll probably even at a certain age be like, wow, that is a nice car. But I'm going to say, do you realize what it took to get this car? This car wasn't handed to me, nor will your car ever be handed to you. Because when I got my first car, I'll never forget. And my first car was I don't even know what year, 1984 Buick Skyhawk, 2-tone.
Not an Oldsmobile Regency. Awesome.
There you go. So plane, about $600 car. But so whether it was $600 or $6,000 or $60,000, the number's irrelevant. What was fun for me is when I was getting close to 16, I remember I wanted a car, and I knew mom and dad couldn't afford to buy me a car, so I went out and I worked. I worked on a farm for my buddies. My best friend's dad owned a farm, and we worked on the farm. I'd pick corn and tomatoes and potatoes, and listen, I loved it. I rode my dirt bike to work, and I did this, and I'd save every dollar. And I had, in my TEDx talk, I referenced that little black box. Well, I had that then, and every dollar I would give it to my mom, and she would put it in that little black box. And then when I got to the point, I remember me and my dad, because this is kind of a dad thing, we went out and we looked at a couple cars. And I stumbled upon that one, which was literally right around the corner from where my dad lived, because my dad and mom had divorced. And it was right out front. I remember seeing it. I'm like, oh, there's no way I could afford it. And we went back and we asked the guy, and it was, I think, $700. But my dad helped me negotiate it down to $600. And I had saved up enough. I think I had saved up like $800 or maybe even $1,000. So when I bought that car, that was my money. I'd worked for that money. So there was an attachment to me in that car, because that was the first thing that I bought that was like, well, it wasn't the first dirt bike but that was like the first thing that gave me the ultimate freedom, and I had earned it. So now if my dad had just gone there and just bought the car for me and handed it to me, I certainly would have loved the car. I would have thanked my dad, but I would have never been able to associate the car with hard work. So I'm going to teach my daughter this. She's going to see my car, and I'm going to say, you can have a car like this. And here's what you got to do. Remember law number 1, the first lesson I taught you? you got to save 10% of what you earn. So, sweetie, as you babysit, as you do things, or when you come to the office to help daddy out, you know, I pay you. Take that money, and you're more than welcome to save more, but 10's the minimum. You save that and put it somewhere where you can't get it. And Vivi, I'm happy to do what my mom did and put it in a box and just keep it in a secret place where you won't know. You won't even know how much money's in there. But that's the good thing. You just focus on the saving. And then when you find the car you want, what we're going to do is we're going to sit down and we're going to look at how much money you've earned, how much money you've saved. And I always reference that as money you keep. And then we're going to go pick a car within that budget. We're going to have a ton of fun. We're going to go to dealerships. We're going to go through online things. We're going to have all the fun that you can have with it. But that's going
to be such a good bonding experience too.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it is. It's super fun doing that. You know, and I can only speak from my experience, but when I went and looked at cars with my dad, man, it was awesome. And listen, I'm 45. I was probably 15 at the time. Actually, I was 15 because I remember I bought the car at 15 and it sat in the garage. I put like a stereo in it and stuff, and that was like what I did until I could drive it.
Pimped your ride until you were 16.
You'd laugh if I told you what my pimping of my ride was back then. I didn't have money to pimp a ride. Oh man! But now like you understand that. So I had value in that car because it was my hard-earned money. I could place and trace back how I earned that money. I could trace the hard days working on the farm, like when it was super early in the morning, and then the days where we were picking tomatoes and potatoes where it was super humid. That's nasty. But I remember that. But that still, now I translate in my mind that equaled the car. So now I added a different step. So you watch the 90-minute video, which teaches you a whole nother level of what I just explained to you. So now what I would say to my daughter, okay, we saved enough to buy this car. Now when we buy this car, we're going to take the money from your bank. So we're not going to go to somebody other banks. We're not going to take the money and borrow it from someone else's bank. We're going to take it from your bank. And folks, some of you listening, you may not know what I'm referring to as the machine that represents the bank, but let's just pretend it's that little black box that has $6,000 that was saved up for my daughter's car. It doesn't matter, okay, because it's irrelevant at this point. When she buys the car, what I'm then going to have her do, and before we go buy it, we're going to actually go on and we're going to look at a calculator, like an auto loan calculator, bankrate.com or whatever. And we're going to do some calculations. Now, she'll know how much money she can afford monthly, or I'll help her figure that out. And we're going to run all these numbers, and she's going to say, okay, well, that's perfect. And we're going to figure out how much that car would cost if she financed it with a traditional bank. Because it's very easy. All those show you what the going interest rate is. So let's just say right now it's 6 or 7%. So if today was the day Vivi's buying the car, we would run the numbers. 6,000 times 6%, and let's just say that the monthly payment's $180. I'm just making a number up.
Yep.
She looks at that number and she's like, oh, I can afford that. Because that's how we buy cars, folks. Everything every one of you have ever been taught about cars today is a monthly payment. You are buying a monthly payment. That is what you're doing. That's how we've been conditioned. So why take her off of that train of understanding the monthly payment? Let's just teach her the same thing that everybody else is going to talk about so she can at least relate with her friends about this. So $180. But here's where the difference is. So even though she saved the money herself, it's her money, it's not the bank's, it's her bank's money, she pays cash for the car. But then she's going to be taught to set up a monthly bill pay for $180 a month. Now, who is that bill pay going to come back to? Her. The check literally is going to be written out to her, but every single month she's going to go to the mailbox, or we're going to just hand her mail, and in the mail is going to come one of those little bill pay checks. Folks, I hope you all know what they look like. You tear the two corners off, you tear the top off, you fold it down. It's an exciting thing. It's a dopamine hit. And she's going to get this every single month. Now, she could do a couple things. She could save that money, which I certainly am going to teach her to put that money back in her bank. Okay? But she could take $80 of it and go out and have ice cream with her friends and put $100 in. I mean, she has that decision. It's her bank. So
Correct.
She gets to decide how that goes back in, but there will never be a day that she will be taught that she can take the $180 and just go and blow it. Some of that $180 has to go back in the bank. And now she's got some money building back up in that bank. So then what will happen is that over a course of time, this will happen every time, she will get all the money back for that car that she bought. Every penny of that, every penny she paid for the car, she'll get every dollar back. and that money will be sitting in the account. So now she gets sick of the car, and she wants a nicer one. Well, now she's saving because she's been taught to save 10%. Plus, now she's recapturing money that she would normally have just given away, and now she's got all the money back for the car. So now she's got more money than she did before. Plus, now she's got the car.
Exactly.
So she sells the car. Doesn't matter what she sells it for, because it doesn't matter. Sometimes we're like, oh,
just icing on the cake.
Just icing on the cake. And then she sells the car, and we add it all up, and whoa, Vivi, you got enough. We can go buy a used Porsche. When you were a child, when you were a little girl, you were infatuated with red Porsche 911s. And listen, I'm kind of making this up, but I'm not making up that she's infatuated with 911s. Like, I don't know why, but she's got Matchbox cars of this, and that's the only one she likes. She calls it Happy Car, and it's a red 911.
My daughters are Lamborghinis. I don't know.
There you
It's
go.
the same. Yeah. It's funny. I was talking to one of my buddies the one day, and I was like, innately we aspire to have beauty and greatness in our lives. And my example for that was, I have never in my life seen a kid at a gas station see a Honda Civic pull up and roll up and be like, oh my God, and like run up to it and want to touch it or whatever. Every child, if a Lamborghini, a Porsche 911, a Ferrari pulls up, they're infatuated with that car. Like, we want to seek greatness. We want nice things in our lives, even though we're conditioned, the other way. But it's fascinating to watch these children's innate flourish, because my daughter's the same, but hers are Lamborghinis. It's fascinating. Yeah.
And the cool thing about that is, normally, take what you just said. And most fathers and even mothers can relate to what we're just talking about. Like, we know our kids look at nice cars. I mean, I drive a nice truck. It's not a car, but when I pull up, I always see kids pointing in, you just tell it's a cool feeling.
Exactly.
But see, here's the thing. Society, for most of the kids out there and most of the parents, has kind of somehow conditioned them to think we can never have one of those.
Yep.
Oh yeah, that's a nice car. I can never have one of those. Whether it's applied or implied or said or whatever, we in our minds think we can't have that. Why?
Yep.
You can't have it because it's a Lamborghini and it's $200,000. You can't have it because it's a 911 and it's whatever they cost, or a G-Wagon because it's $130,000. We associate the price with, I can't do that.
Yep.
Well, that's a lie. You could have any
That's
car you
what I
want.
think.
You can pay anything you want, but it's not the car. It's what we have to do to get it and how much we actually want it. So if
Correct.
my daughter wants a Porsche 911, we can reverse engineer that, and she can have it. But she doesn't need to literally dwell on it every day. If she just goes out and does what I teach in that TEDx talk, those 6 lessons, if she just applies those, there's no way she wouldn't be able to afford a 911 or a Lamborghini.
She could
That's
manage
the
a
difference.
McDonald's and do it.
She could do
Like,
anything.
I literally went back when I thought, because I think it's natural to then go back and be like, damn, I wish I knew about this when I was that age. And we kind of must have came from similar backgrounds, right? Like, I had a dirt bike from the time I was 12 that I had to buy until I was 16. And then I sold the dirt bike plus the money I worked with baling hay to buy my car to, it was just like this snowball.
It's perfect. It's exact.
And then I remember I got a job at a truck dock. That was like the job to have. And it was exactly 54 miles driveway to driveway. And when I turned 18, I was still a senior in high school and I got this job. But I was making $15.15 an hour working with 45 or 50-year-old men. But I had to work from 5 in the morning to 5 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday. Then I had to work, 60 hours a week in the summertime. I made a lot of money, like an insane amount of money for someone who had no bills. And I started thinking, my God, if those things that you're going to instill in your daughter and I'm going to instill in mine were implemented when I was 18 even, the structure I would have set up now, I think it's human nature to go back and think about what if, right? But I think it really lended so much to the power of like what we have the opportunity and what we get to teach our children now. It's huge because we're only bound by our debts. And I think that's one of the tricky things with this for me. That I was conditioned, again, is growing up, don't have debt, always pay everything off, pay it off as fast as possible. Like, if you're going to finance something, whatever it is, pay it off as quick as possible. And with this, you have the opportunity to do that if you wanted to still match the percentage. Like if you borrowed $100,000 and you were going to pay 10% back and you put $110,000 back in the next day, fine. Essentially you did the thing. But I think for me, the biggest struggle right now was it's okay to have debt with yourself. because nobody owns you.
Well,
Does that make sense?
If I may, let me just make that real crystal simple, crystal clear.
Please
for
do.
your audience.
Please do.
When you think of a traditional bank, we all know how a bank works. We go out and we work for money, and then what do? We taught to put it in somebody else's bank. Okay, whatever bank, whatever name of the bank is that you put your money in. When you put the money in the bank, that feels good, doesn't it? Making deposits in the bank, you always feel good about it. It's more money you got tomorrow. It's a good feeling. That's an asset to you. But to the bank, that's a liability, because they then basically are holding your money. So banks have to convert liabilities into assets. So they very quickly lend that money out. So now they've got a loan on the books, which is an asset to the bank, and the bank receives a payment, which is principal and interest every single month. So are loans good for banks?
Of course.
Yes, of course they are. Are loans a way for the bank to make money without working any harder?
Of course.
Of course they are. It's how banks make money. So why can't we be the bank? Think about that. Why is it that a loan that we originate, that is our loan, in the example of Vivi, when she buys her car, she's going to take a loan from her bank, and that's how she's going to look at it. She owns the bank, and the bank could be a little black box, the bank could be a specially designed whole life, whatever. She owns the bank. And if her mind perceives it the same way as any other bank, she knows that when she takes money from her bank and buys something with it, that is good. Because now, it's good under one circumstance. The loan itself isn't good, but the payments coming back are the good part. But
Right.
anytime you make a loan, you always get a payment back, because that's what loans are. Money out, payments back. So when you think about that, when you think about debt, we've only known debt from one side of the equation. We've only known debt is bad because we've always accumulated bad debt.
Yeah.
Credit cards, car payments, lines of credit, mortgages. We've always borrowed money from the traditional banking system, and it's not your fault. It's not our kids' fault that that's all they know. It's because that's all we've been conditioned to do. It's literally part of the master plan, but we're not going to get into that. But think about it. That's how the banking system is as big as it is. That's why it has so much control. That's why when you hear about the Fed raising interest rates and everything else, the Fed is the central banks. They
Correct.
control everything, because thy with the gold has the control. Always.
Yep.
So if you just change the dynamic, and now you're the bank, and everything you buy, you fund with your bank. The downside is you got to save the money up. But that isn't bad if you're a young child and that's all you've ever known is to save. I mean,
Yep.
that's one of the greatest gifts my mom did for me. And she did teach me to save in that. And she taught me to save, but I witnessed her save. I watched her save spare change in this giant, and she still has it. She still does it today. This giant glass thing. It was like just a big glass jar. And she'd put her spare change in it. But I watched, not her saving, I watched the glass jar fill up. That was the cool part about the clear glass. You see it fill up. And then on occasion, my mom brought me in to count it all up, roll it up, probably because she just needed help. But for me, it was fascinating. And then I watched how those little rolled coins turned into the lawnmower. They turned into whatever my mom needed over the years. So from a very young age, I witnessed saving, I witnessed accumulation, and I witnessed what that got you and what that got my mom. All that saving then resulted in a cool new Craftsman lawnmower. Now, some of you might be like, lawnmowers aren't cool. Well, to my mom, it was. Okay, it was a really big deal. So then when I was young, my mom taught me to save. And how she did it is she didn't just say, oh, you got to save money, let's go put it in the bank. She literally bought me, and I should have brought it here for this one, but it's just a little black box, and it's got a slide top. And every time I'd make money, I would come home and I'd be really excited. I'd have the cash, I'd be excited, and I'd be like, Mom, I got this. And she'd grab the box, we'd put the money in there, and she'd put it in the safe, which I didn't know the key, I didn't know the combo for. So now the money went in there, but as a child, I forgot that I put that money in. Probably a week later, I forgot that I put the money in. I'm just out earning more and having fun as a kid and doing fun things. And then I kept doing that. So in the TEDx talk, I talk about how we went and rode that dirt bike, the KX and the 125. Now, when I went there, I was that kid, like you mentioned, about the Lamborghini and the Porsche pulling up at the gas station. In my mind, I couldn't have it.
Yep.
It was out of reach. Like, it was just too much. My mom was just being cool and let me go and ride dirt bikes. And she made friends with Joe Hebler, the owner of the place, and he just let me ride them. Like, there was no way in my mind I thought that that day was going to be the day I was going to be able to take the dirt bike home, until after I rode them, she asked, how do you like them? And I said, I love it. That KX is amazing. I'm ready to just go home and keep dreaming about it, keep drawing it on my Trapper Keepers. But then she says, how would you like to take that dirt bike home? And I did. And I paid cash for it out of that little black box. So right there, nothing was ever the same after that, because now it was real to me. It wasn't a Craftsman lawnmower that Mom bought. It was the dirt bike that I'd been literally fascinating, or I'm using the wrong words, but I've been fascinated about, and also just every day thinking about. And all of a sudden it just became real. So, of course, everything else throughout my life has been like that. And now today it's just bigger stakes, bigger things, bigger houses.
Right.
And,
of course.
But, like, I think about money the same way on everything. There's nothing out of reach.
You know, it's fascinating because you were gifted with that, and that's amazing. The paradigm shift that we go through. I remember it's kind of a similar situation with you. Again, I grew up in Western Pennsylvania on the side of a mountain, nobody around, 25 minutes to the closest store, like middle of nowhere. And to drive into another town, there was this little audio store for like cars, right, where they would like install audio systems. And my audio system in my car was a cassette tape that plugged into a CD player, you know, and like that's, and then it played through the speakers. Like, it was awesome, right? It was like $10. It's, you know, whatever, Walmart. But they posted up, this was before I turned 16, but they posted up when I was probably like 12 that they were doing a sound system for a Lamborghini. And it was a yellow Lamborghini Countach. I don't know why this was in my hometown. It makes no sense, because wherever you bought it surely had a better audio system place, you know? But you could come sit in it if you were a kid. And my friend's mom took us there. And I sat in this driver's seat, and they had a VHS tape of Metallica playing on this little screen. Like, what, you know? And I'll never forget thinking to myself at 12 years old, there's more than this town, and I'm going to find it. And I probably didn't think about it again for another 10 or 15 years, you know, but now that I'm out in the world and in other towns, you know, I'm in South Florida, like I see 17 Lamborghinis a day. Every time I see one, it brings me back to that moment of like, there's something else here. And it was just fascinating. I mean, the dirt bike's the exact same thing, right? Like and knowing that you can achieve it though is such a crucial part. And, you know, this I think goes right in alignment with, what you're talking about. I do a lot of subconscious programming with my daughter, because we until the age of 7 are wide open for subconscious interpretation and programming. I believe us.
Really great book about that.
What book did you read?
Mind Hacking Happiness.
I have not read that one. Okay, I'm gonna have to check that out. I've read a lot of the old stuff like Neville Goddard, Wallace Wattles, Murphy, all that. So for me, when she was born, I'm like, okay, this starts now, because I got 7 years. I say until they start to question Santa. Once they start to question Santa, that subconscious is starting to lock in all of the programming. But one of the things that I've instilled with her, and I think this is the same thing with money and savings, it'll make sense. When you and I went to school, we learned about Albert Einstein and geniuses. We learned about them. Well, we viewed that as this thing up here. Like, you're not him. He's a genius, and what he did, there's only a few people on the planet can understand. And so I'm like, okay, that made me feel dumb. Let's just start there. And I already was a terrible student to begin with, so then we add all these things on. I'm like, so how do I augment this for my daughter to where she views herself as Albert Einstein? So since the day she was born, I have whispered in her ear at nighttime, you are a genius and you apply your wisdom. I'm talking to that subconscious mind. Now, she was in school, probably 3.5 years old, and I didn't tell her these things when she was awake until she was probably around that age, maybe a little bit sooner, 2-ish. And the teacher said something to her. She finished her project, gave it to her, and she was like, Sloan, you're a genius. And she was like, I know, and I apply my wisdom, and just turned around and walked away. The beauty of this here is when she goes to school and they talk about geniuses, she will equate to being talked about as herself, because the subconscious mind will vibrate, resonate, and orient to her, not better than.
Because it doesn't know any better, because that's all it's ever heard.
All it's ever heard. This is no different than the saving and everything you're teaching your daughter, which is what I'm ready to usher in with mine now that I've finally learned about finances, right? And I think that's so important. And I have a whole slew of these affirmations that I'm going to do a whole podcast on that I do with my daughter because I think it's so important. But you're really talking to the subconscious mind with her, and it will become absolute second nature of, yes, I can afford anything. Yes, I can have the Porsche. Yes, I save. Yes, I can do anything I want in life. But with X, Y, and Z followed behind it, right? Like we have to show that. And that's, you know, I've talked on other podcasts before too, when I'll put my daughter to bed. I'm divorced, have a great relationship with my ex-wife, all of that stuff. But when I put her to bed and she's in my house, she's like, oh, Dad, will you lay with me and go to sleep? I'll lay with her for a little bit, but I'm like, baby girl, I can't go to sleep. Because about 1.5 years ago, she's like, Dad, I want a house where we open the door and our feet are in the sand. And I'm like, we can have that. We absolutely can have that. Dad needs to work very smart and very hard at the smart work in order to have it, but we can do that. So now we're on a mission to have that, right? And so at nighttime, when she wants me to lay with her, I'm like, baby girl, remember how you want to wake up and have your feet in the sand? This is part of that hard, smart work Dad has to do at the end of the night to get us to that point. You know, and I think we have to not just tell, but we have to show and live it.
I mean, go back to the story about my mom. Like, my mom could have told me to save and told me, you know, how to do things, but seeing was believing. So, like, there's the two dynamics, right? And the mind is the most fascinating thing, and I love that you do that every day. You know, whether she's sleeping or awake, I tell her she's beautiful. You know, and I always constantly are telling her good things. Now she's only 3, but I love that. I'll start telling her she's genius because she is. And the only difference between someone that's genius and someone that's not is the ability to believe that they are. I truly believe that. And some people would say, no, there's a lot more. And yes, there is, but is there really?
No.
Because I don't think there is. And
no.
I don't think, and I'm reading a book right now, Blink, and it's all about, like, I think we are capable of so much more, but because society tells us we're not, because of testing and stupid, you know, things that they put us through, we are herded into a specific category, and that's where we spend the majority of our life, and that is a shame.
Yep.
Now, I'm not a highly educated man, okay? I did good in high school, you know, I was on a roll, but I had to work really freaking hard. And there was a lot of kids I was in school with that did not have to work hard, but I did, and that's how I got the grades. And I went on to 2 years of school, but then I became a business owner, and school wasn't important. And actually, at that point, I had developed some associations with school and not being successful, because I had seen so many people that were working so hard at school, and then they'd go off and they weren't successful like I thought they were going to be. And as I've gotten older, I've seen this even more prevalent. Like, I've watched people spend 6 to 8 years in school. I live in a very affluent neighborhood, and I know some of these doctors in there have spent 8, 9 years in school. So that, just think about that, right? Like, where are you when you come out of school and actually start your life? You're way further behind where I was. And I know roundabout what a physician makes, because obviously I'm in the money space. I talk to thousands of people. I know what people make, you know, and some people are like, oh my God, doctors make 200, 250, surgeons make 500, 600. That ain't shit. I don't mean to put that into retrospect, but they spent 8 years of their life going to school to learn to do that. And you know what they don't have? Freedom of time. Now that they've got all this education, they've got this big paycheck, they're on call all the time. And
all the time.
They can't,
and they got $500,000 of debt.
They can't just live their life. And I know this because I talk to doctors all the time. Doctors seek me out because of what I teach, because they want their money to work for them, because they can't do this. They literally are begging, I can't do this the rest of my life. And half of me wants to say, well, you put yourself in this position.
Of course.
You make plenty of money. Yeah, but we spend so much. And they do. They spend most of it. The big house, the big cars, the big boats, the second house. Like, so all I got to do is just teach them the same thing I got to teach my daughter. There's no difference between a surgeon making $600,000 and my 3-year-old daughter. The only thing is they've both been conditioned at a different stage of their life. The doctor's been conditioned to spend 8 years in school, be very regimented. I got to do this, 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 this. And because of that, I can't have freedom of time. And they can't. They can't.
Right.
And my daughter will never, ever be in that situation, because she's going to understand that above anything else, the most precious and valuable thing anyone has is their hour, their time, because it can't be valued. And she's going to know that. And she's also going to know that I can make any amount of money. Money is the easy part, but it will, at the beginning, come at the cost of my time. So I have to be very cautious what I spend my time doing, because I have to give up my most precious asset that I will ever have, time. So if I'm going to give my time, I want to do something like you mentioned to your daughter that's really smart. I got to work smart, okay? And then eventually, after working smart, she's going to have accumulated money, the tool, and then she's going to learn to not have to work as hard, because now she's going to focus her attention on making her money work for her. The second lesson, you save, then you make your money work for you. And when your money works for you, then you get really good at protecting your wealth. Something, obviously we had to work on you a little bit. But
a little bit.
yours wasn't the third lesson or the third law of wealth. Yours was the fourth that you fell victim to, and that is seeking unrealistic returns. And that is something a large portion of millennials, or even most of the population, went through in the last couple of years, because it just seemed like everything was going and it was never going to end until it did.
It ended.
And
there's so many lessons that I learned in there, but I'm grateful for them. I wasn't at first, and now I'm like,
you should be grateful, because that's the only way you can learn is by doing, and that's what we just talked about.
In the gratitude in that, I was talking to one of my buddies at the gym, and his grandfather, he's from Saudi Arabia, all of these things. His grandfather was doing a deal with Wells Fargo for something, and wrote Wells Fargo a check, and the guy took the check and left. They couldn't trace the money, couldn't find it. $4 million he lost. He's like, Habibi, you're all right. And I was like, yeah, that's good perspective.
He just took the check and walked away with it.
Just bounced. Yeah, $4 million.
I never heard something that big.
Yeah. So he's like,
you're
you're
good,
all right,
man. You're
Habibi.
good.
I'm like, okay.
That's about half a day's interest on that.
Yeah.
You lost.
Yeah. Crazy. But that's
nuts.
So those, I think it's all relevant, and I think that the way, back to kind of what you were talking about, it's the belief. The example I love to use when I'm describing this belief is the NFL Combine and the NFL Draft. There are, 3,000, 4,000 Division I NFL-ready players, physically look at them, and you're like, that guy could play in the NFL if you didn't know anything else. Only maybe 300 or 400 get invited to the Combine. Only, I don't know how many get drafted. 300 get drafted every year. How many of those make the team? 52 of them plus reserves. The physical specimen, in essence, when you're at Division I, are pretty much the same, give or take like the variant of like an Aaron Donald who's just a freak, right? The thing that separates all of them between becoming an NFL athlete and going off to another thing is the belief system.
Absolutely.
That's it. The physical traits are all there in all of them when you're at that level.
And sometimes they're not even there. Look at Brady. Love him or hate him. Like, the dude, look at when he was in the Combine. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You would look at him and be like, no way. And you know what? Everybody did look at him and say,
right. What did he get
no
drafted
way.
in the 6th or 7th round? They were like, nah.
Whatever it was. I don't really follow all that.
Yeah.
But he had the belief. He had the belief and the desire that the other 2,900 or whatever, 2,999 of them did not have. And even though he wasn't as physically fit, even though he was not as tall or whatever all the attributes were that he didn't have, the belief overpowered it. And look at him now. Listen, you can't deny that he was the greatest of all time. You can't. You just can't deny that. There's no way anybody can. And if you do, then you're just a hater. And I should have put my other hat on that said haters need hugs too.
I saw a sign the other day. It said, "Be happy. It drives people crazy." I was like, I need to have that. The best way to drive people crazy. All right, we got about 5 minutes. So I want to ask you. I want to do just a little thing with kids. What is your favorite part about being a dad? So for me, let me give you my example, because this was hard. It took me an hour to come up with this. And mine was, it's the first time in my life I ever felt I was able to give and receive unconditional love. So in that term, what is that thing that you became a dad and were like, God, this is the best part about this?
There's so many things. That's what's so hard about this. But
you can hit me with all of them.
Unconditional love, but it was the first point in my life that I had something greater than me, my mom, and everything else to live for. And it just, unless you're a parent or a father, you can't understand this. It was my whole life, I'd always just kind of done things for me and for the greater good of whoever's in my circle at that time. But then when she was born, like everything's changed. It was just like a light bulb. And it wasn't even something I changed. It wasn't something I had to work at. It just changed. And all of a sudden, some people would say your why, right? All of a sudden I had a why that was far bigger than me, that I didn't care about my life. All I cared about was hers and how she was going to be prepared for this world and this life. So you can call it unconditional love, but I'll just say that the one thing that changed and the one thing I say is different and will never go back is the why.
Yeah, I love that. I love that so much. All right, so let's tell everybody where they can find you, where they can consume more of this information, where they can find that 90-minute video that changed my life, all that kind of stuff, Instagram handles, all those kinds of things, and then we'll sign off. Maybe we'll do this again.
Yeah. We got a lot more to cover. I mean,
we can keep going. I just know you're on a time schedule, so I don't want to push you up against it today. But I know there's a lot more to cover.
Yeah, I think it'll be cool. We gave them enough to kind of chew on, and then what we'll do is we'll jump back and we'll do another round where we'll go deeper into the banking system that I talked about for my daughter. And I used the little black box, but there's a whole nother level that's going to be talked about in that 90-minute video that will show you how to just change one thing, and that's where that money goes.
Yeah.
It then puts a perpetual tailwind behind your money. Think of an airplane. Airplanes cannot fly with tailwinds both ways. But imagine if there was an airplane that flew both ways with a perpetual tailwind. That plane would be the one everybody would want to fly in because it'd always arrive early. It'd always be the fastest bet. Well, there is a place where you can put your money that gives you that perpetual tailwind forever, for the rest of your life, and there's no outside factor that can change that tailwind. It will always be there, and it will only get stronger and stronger as time goes by. So if you want to learn about that tailwind, you would go to chrisnaugle.com, and on that website, a 90-minute video will pop up. Don't make any excuses that you don't have time. The 90-minute video changed both of our lives here and thousands of others. So watch the 90-minute video and then book a call. But, if you want more, because a lot of people like to just deep dive, well, okay, there's 600 and maybe almost 700 videos on my YouTube channel all about this. Highly produced, super fun to watch. So every one of my social media platforms is at the Chris Naugle. So just add a "the" in front of my name, and there's so much free content out there. And I think the thing you'll find is at the end you'll be like, well, how do I buy something from this guy? Well, the only thing you can really buy are these hats and some t-shirts and that.
Yeah, but it's awesome. So thank you so much for getting on. I will shoot you a text about all of those affirmations I use with my daughter. I'm going to do a whole podcast on them, but start programming, so that you can know too. I love it. I love it. I think it's the most valuable thing we can give our kids.
And I 100% believe that. I am the biggest believer in that, and I just can't believe that's something everybody doesn't understand.
Yeah, so we'll get on. We'll talk about that too.
Love
Beautiful.
It, thanks for having me on.
All right. Thank you so much. This was amazing.
You're welcome.
That's the end of this episode of It's Dad Time, but there's plenty more where that came from. Please subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode, and we'd love to hear from you, whether it's questions, success stories, or horror stories, so we can help you raise the next generation of happy and successful children. Follow us on Instagram and send us a message at itsdadtime_. We'll see you next time on It's Dad Time.